All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our financial check-in with Fame. Hopefully, given that you've joined us today, you're likely aware that this is a monthly webinar series that we offer on the first Friday of every month at noon. And we cover a whole variety of financial topics. This year, we're focusing an awful lot on student loans. So I want to give you an update about next month's webinar. But we really try to focus on topics related to financial wellness, planning, saving, and affording higher education. And again, some of those include just basic money management themes along the way to help you be in a better position to save and plan. So we're really excited to have you here today and excited about this topic. I'm thrilled to welcome Steve Kautz. Steve, and this is actually his first financial check-in webinar with us. Steve is our new financial education program specialist here at the Finance Authority of Maine, and he joins us after spending many years in education, teaching personal finance and supporting the Maine Jumpstart Coalition for Personal Financial Literacy and its statewide financial education efforts. I did not introduce myself. I probably should have done that. My name is Mary Dyer, and I'm a financial education programs manager at Fame. And we're just really thrilled to have you here. A few housekeeping details. I am recording the webinar, so if you have to drop off, if you can't stay for the entire time, we will make the recording available along with a copy of the slides. If you have questions, you can enter them in the Q&A, or comments you can add in the chat. I'm going to turn my sound off as soon as I'm done talking. And so certainly add any comments, questions that you may have in the Q&A, and I'll monitor that and share them with Steve as we move throughout the session. Next month, I just want to let you know before we continue, we are hosting Betsy Mayotte. Once again, she is a national student loan expert, and she will be talking about all of the latest updates related to Repayment Restart, and specifically the new SAVE repayment program and some of the income-driven repayment programs that have been modified and recently launched as early as, just this week. So I hope that you'll join us for that webinar. That session is being held on Friday, November 3rd at noon. And again, we will record that. We will make it available if you're unable to attend, but that will be an hour all focused on Repayment Restart. So with that, once again, thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who is going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour talking with us about economics.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you're here with us today to talk. I was also really glad to hear people say it's an exciting topic because back when I was studying economics, nobody said that. But I happen to think it's a very exciting topic. And that's why I'm doing this. And for me, it was many years in the classroom teaching math, personal finance, and economics. And personally, it was many, many years trying to get my personal finances in order. And the two came together for me, and economics really was a key part of me understanding personal finance and the decisions that I had to make to get on a better path. So that's my focus today, to try to connect some of the concepts of economics that support personal financial decisions, if you will. Like Mary said, please put questions as we go. Or at the end, and there'll be a few fun fact questions at the end for some participation as well. So here we go. There we go. If all the economists were laid end to end, they would not reach a conclusion. I can't find a better econ quote than this one, because people see things a different way. Economics is a social science. It's not exact. And everybody's point of view affects how they can see particular concepts in economics, and therefore how they might view the economy or their own personal finances. Contradictions are 100% normal. And hopefully, through analysis and understanding of these, you can make better decisions in your own life. To when you understand the world and the economic world going on around you, it can help drive you in the best direction. And I put this other point, is it economics or is it politics? Over the years that I got more and more into personal finance and actually teaching and economics together, I have found the political climate mixed with economics has become very clouded, and it can be very difficult to know if something is economics disguised as politics, or something is politics disguised as economics. And I believe that understanding some basic economic tools can help you decide which is which. And that's very important when it comes to the decisions that we make. Back to when I got into economics, I majored in economics because honestly, it was the major at my school with the fewest business courses and the least amount of math, because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 18. And I didn't want just a business degree, and I didn't want just math. So at my school, economics offered me the chance to take other social sciences, and it turned out to be a good major for me, and allowed me to branch off into many areas. But it's still one of the more popular majors. But what I didn't know then is that years later into my adult life, understanding economics, having a foundation in economics was the absolutely critical point to me turning my own personal finances around and being able to then teach personal finance. And when it comes to economics, boy, is there anything going on out there in the world that's interesting? Uh, Looming recession, isn't that what they always say? Oh, we're going to have a recession. Are we headed for a recession? Are we in a recession? Way overused word, recession, because in many cases it does not reflect how our individual lives are going and how we are interacting with the economy or how our own finances are going. Other issues, unemployment, and for maybe definitely the most significant instance of this in my life, the lack of unemployment. We continue to see incredibly low unemployment and unfilled jobs, which is affecting the economy in a huge way because it's driving wages in certain sectors, which drive prices. Inflation. Inflation's been a big deal for a couple of years. It is, I would say, under control, but still higher than we want as an economy. It's certainly higher than the Federal Reserve and our politicians want it to be, and we can all feel it. We can all see prices continue to go up, and it's very bad for our situations. It's very, very bad for people trying to buy a house or trying to eat or anything. Other issues, the banking system, crisis after crisis, the war and the impact on global supply, in particular, obviously oil, the influence on the price of oil, climate change. Two sides to that. There are a lot of economic opportunities coming out of work on climate change and industries changing, but it also puts pressure on our systems because it costs more to have cleaner fuels and cleaner manufacturing. Student loan repayment is a sneaky factor here in terms of will we head toward a slowdown in the economy or a recession. As student loan repayment ramps up, if people are indeed repaying their loans, that's going to take a lot of money that was in circulation at restaurants and hotels and travel and consumer goods, and that money is going to be going to loan repayment. If that happens on a large scale, as it should, that could be a big factor in our overall economic performance. Economics is here to help. I call it America's unique economic experiment. I've lived abroad for 10 years in a couple of different countries, and our system is full of opportunity and full of challenges and very difficult to navigate, much more complicated than a lot of other societies. And understanding economics, I believe, can be a bit of a handrail to steady you. I don't think knowing economics is necessarily going to move someone up the financial ladder or down, but I definitely think this foundation can help you steady yourself. Or you can think of it, and it was for me, as I tried to figure out personal finance, economics was a lens or a filter, the way I saw things. It became a partner in my decision making, which in turn helped me get my finances under control, my spending, and how I managed all of those aspects of my life. And then I put the roller coaster representing the cycles of an economy, which are natural in a relatively free market. And then the extra loop there represented the pandemic. To say something threw us for a loop, I'm guessing that's where that phrase came from, because the pandemic certainly has done that to our economics. We are on the, I guess, positive swing of that now in terms of the economy is booming, but we're still seeing a lot of residual effects from the pandemic, not all good. So to talk about personal finance and the connections to economics, I've boiled it down today to what I'm calling 4 pillars of economics. There are many you could look at, but I picked 4 that for me and for my teaching, for my students, and in life, I feel personal finance is directly connected to these. And understanding these at some level can really help personal financial behavior. Scarcity, trade-off and opportunity cost, the circular flow of the economy, and economic policy. And then the question, were the changes in my personal finance behavior influenced by my increased understanding of economics, or is it the other way around? I won't answer completely right now, something to think about, and I hope you'll think about it in your own lives. So the first pillar I'm calling scarcity. And the reason I picked it first is scarcity is what's called the basic problem of economics. Ultimately, everything is scarce. Therefore, decisions have to be made. If it wasn't for scarcity, there would be no decisions to be made. We'd all have everything we want all the time, personally and governmental, for nations and politics. But we don't. We have to make decisions. There's only so much of everything. You can even argue that if grains of sand could somehow be scarce someday. But everything that we interact with in our lives is scarce. So we have to make decisions. Economics classically defined the study of individuals or nations managing scarce resources to get what they want or need. That's what economics basically is. However, economics nowadays, I like to say, is everything is expensive. It's the other party's fault. A recession is imminent. A crisis is coming. And if you repeat this loud and often, that's what passes for economics nowadays, unfortunately. And then finally, ceteris paribus is something I'm going to refer to throughout, which basically means all things being equal or in a vacuum. And it's important in economics, especially for Americans, well, for anybody, but particularly for us today, because things don't happen in a vacuum. We have government intervention in particular all over our economy. Yes, we are a relatively free market, but our economy is loaded with government intervention. And therefore, ceteris paribus, the theories of economics applying where you're in a vacuum, supply and demand, they don't always work. And it's really important to hear and to take in economic data, predictions, everything else, with this understanding that it's not in a vacuum. Government intervention and other external factors will affect what happens and therefore will affect you. And hopefully it can help guide your decision making. Scarcity, number 1. Number 2, trade-off and opportunity cost. Trade-off is easy to grasp. When I choose one thing, I can't choose something else sometimes. If I want to spend my $6 at Starbucks on a latte, well, that's $6 I don't have for something else. Pretty easy to grasp, not always easy to accept. We don't always want to make that trade-off. Very easy topic to get into with my high school students, but for adults, I think we kind of say, yeah, but I don't want to do that. I want both things. And then a lot of times, unfortunately, we often go to the credit card, right? When we can't afford both things, but we want them, we go to the credit card or we borrow. Guns and butter is the classic econ example of trade-off for nations. How much resources do we put into things like defense versus how much resources do we put into things like food and education and feeding people? So it's the guns and butter of your life. How much money goes into the things you have to have, like housing, and how much of your resources go into the things you want to have. Opportunity cost is a little more abstract, but I think incredibly, incredibly important and critical to understand. And this is a tremendous personal finance connection. Opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative. Okay, whatever you give up, that's your opportunity cost. So a lot of times that's not financial. A lot of times that's time or some other resource. I chose the Starbucks latte, and there's a cost, financial cost, but the opportunity cost was that I could have had a latte from another shop, or I could have had a different thing altogether. So whatever you give up is the opportunity cost. And I like to throw in this idea in terms of personal finance of the opportunity benefit, meaning because I made a certain choice, in many cases, not purchasing something, what's my opportunity benefit? So I decided not to buy that extra, you name the consumer product that I didn't need. My opportunity benefit is that is more money for my future, kids' education, buy a house, travel, whatever that may be. So I argue when thinking about opportunity cost, also think about the opportunity benefit. The next bullet is Tanstaffel. And I guess I don't see you all, so I can't say raise your hands. But Tanstaffel, if anybody knows, means there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And there are even Tanstaffel societies. I know I belonged to one in Virginia for a while, and people gather and talk economics. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. I would always tell my students, if somebody says something is free, put your hand on your wallet and back away, because nothing's free. There's a trade-off. There's an opportunity cost. There's an opportunity benefit. We need to have this key economic concept into our personal financial decisions. I mention here a couple of my favorite books because they connect directly to these ideas. The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, which is a fascinating look at consumption. And it really helped me understand my consumption patterns, if you will, and how to change them. And then Nickel and Dime by Barbara Ehrenreich to look at the choices we make in terms of jobs, income, housing, and lifestyle. The third pillar of econ that I want to mention is the circular flow of the economy. Now, the picture here is a very simplified version. Let's zoom in a little. A very simplified version of the economic flow of activity. We have our individuals who work. We have businesses who need labor. We spend our money on products. That money goes back to the businesses, and so on and so on. So the circular flow and seeing how everything moves around is important to understand how everything's connected. And then where do your personal finances fit in to this circular flow of economic activity? Where do they fit in? Part of it fits in terms of injections and withdrawals to the economy. There are many, but these are the three big ones. Injections to economic activity, which can affect all of us for sure, are government spending. We are all in recent memory very aware of government spending during the pandemic. It kept many aspects of our economy going and helped many of us personally with stimulus money. That's an injection into the circular flow. Investment means when companies, individuals take money out of their own investments and build new factories, open new businesses, whatever. Exports inject money into our American circular flow. And then there are withdrawals. They offset the others. Taxes. Taxes take money out of the circular flow of the economy. Savings. When you save, it should be a good thing. It is a good thing for us as individuals, but savings is actually not great for an economy. And then imports. When we import products, dollars leave the country. Very important to us as an economy and individually. Where do you fit in? So what's in your economy? Well, for us, we have our income and our spending, consumption and debt, the relationship between consumption and debt, our savings, our investing. Budgeting kind of circles around all of this, and then surprises, car repairs, medical situations, and so on. So it's important to think of that circular flow of the economy and then your own, yours and your family's, how they fit in, where they fit in, and how these factors, both injections and withdrawals, affect your results and your goals. All right, that's 3: scarcity, trade-off, and circular flow. Now, in getting ready for the 4th pillar, I pose a question, but in this form, with the Johnny Carson reference. The answer to the question is GDP, economic policy, and the Federal Reserve. That's the answer to the question. And the question is, what are 3 things nobody cares about until they're unemployed? It is always amazing how these concepts are so far from our lives until something bad happens. And then we definitely, like the pandemic, and then we want to know more, or an election that we don't like the result of the election, or we're interested in it, or a local issue. Now it's, oh, what is GDP? What is economic policy? What is the Federal Reserve doing with interest rates? And why is it making things so difficult with the housing market, for example? On the other hand, I can get more interest in my bank account. So the 4th pillar, economic analysis and policymaking. So for the analysis, let's start with analysis. For analysis, we have GDP, which is gross domestic product. Gross domestic product, in short form, measures the national income. How are we doing as a country? And the R word, the recession word. Well, what is the latest? I just added this morning because all year, talk of recession coming in 2023. Well, the latest figures, which are estimates right now for the 3rd quarter of 2023, have the economy growing at over a 4% clip, which is very high. Estimates, the first 2 quarters were 1.9%, 1.6%, 2%, which is fine. Most folks predicted it would be going down. Instead, it shot up in the 3rd quarter. And if anybody tried to get tickets for a concert this summer or do anything this summer, we're probably not surprised. People are spending money. Now, that's good. The economy is rocking. Employment continues to be strong, and employment numbers also came out today, and they're much stronger than expected. So you might notice your stocks are back up today. However, all of this puts pressure on inflation, which has been an issue and seems to be coming under control. But with the economy doing well and employment so high, continues to put more pressure on inflation when there's more money out there. So another part of analysis, like I said, is unemployment. And with the very low unemployment, that affects all of our economy and affects all of us. And then policy. There are 2 main economic policy engines or factors: fiscal policy and monetary policy. Get more into these just a little bit. Fiscal policy is basically the federal government making decisions with the budget, and monetary policy is the Federal Reserve Bank. A little more economic analysis and policy, more on the recession idea. What is a recession? I do think it's important for us to know what a recession is, because the word is thrown around loosely. recklessly, often for political gain. And I do think it's important to understand that a technical recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And then I put self-fulfilling prophecies because if we are told a recession is coming, we tend to hold on to our money, which then causes a recession. So it's a very interesting thing how that happens in our media, especially throwing around this word without knowing what it means. We are nowhere near that. Again, our economy has been growing somewhere between 1% and 2% all year. And for this last quarter, it seems to be over 4%. We don't have final numbers, but it's looking that way. GDP, gross domestic product. What does it mean? What is it made of? Again, it's a measure of our national performance or our national income. It's made up of 4 principal factors: consumer spending, C; investment, I; government spending, G; and net exports, NX. And you add those up and you get Y, which is national income. And these numbers represent the approximate breakdown in percentages of each main part of our economy. These numbers fluctuate from time to time. They're not always this, but pretty solidly around this figure. Consumer spending is a whopping 70% of our economy. And that is big. That is much bigger than probably any country in the world. 17% approximately from investment, 17% government spending, and negative 4% net exports because we import more than we export. Now, during the pandemic, government spending was up and consumer spending was down during the pandemic. We still do not have really good numbers on how extreme it got, but now things have normalized, and consumer spending is once again the king. And that leads me to the next point on consumption and the paradox of thrift. We consume, Americans consume a lot, and there's a paradox here. In personal finance education, and what our grandparents told us, be careful with your money, save for the future, always put some money aside, don't buy things you don't need. Well, I would tell my students, if my efforts in personal finance education are successful, I will destroy the economy. I said that. And what I mean by that is if we all saved much more money than we do, if we used credit cards less, if we bought less, our economy would take a serious hit. So it's tricky to think about, but I think you can feel confident that not everybody all of a sudden is going to stop buying stuff. Our economy will move along at a pretty good clip. We all have room to make changes in our personal finance behavior and our spending that will not destroy the economy. But if we all did, that could happen. So it's kind of a funny way to look at it and an easy thing to remember. All right, a further note on the American consumer, and I am one of them. Consumption, credit-driven overconsumption in particular, is the key fuel for the American economic engine. Absolutely. This country thrives and runs on credit. Consumption, credit-driven overconsumption in particular, is the key instigator for Americans' personal financial troubles. That is tricky because the two things don't get along well. Something's got to give. I can only say that in our own lives, and I hope all of you and your people you interact with can find some ways to improve your personal finance decisions and have a more stable financial life and have more choices available to you. But as an economy, it's a paradox. And a little more on economic analysis. Inflation. So a lot of folks, that probably one of the biggest questions I always field and I ask myself a lot of times, what's causing inflation? And there's a lot of theories. Some have been proven, some are only theories. And again, if you lined up all the economists, they'd probably say something different. The wage price spiral theory, which has been around a long time, is looking pretty good for the last couple of years as part of the cause of inflation, because as wages pressure on wages to go up. People have more money, that drives prices up. On the other hand, if prices go up, employees demand higher wages, and the cycle continues. So the pressure on minimum wage in a lot of places in the country, including Maine, has definitely put pressure on prices because folks have more money in their pocket. We spend money, 70% of the economy, 70 cents on the dollar, is spent by consumers. And prices go up ultimately for two reasons. They either go up because they have to, or they go up because they can. Now, some things, let's look at the war in Ukraine, has caused certain products and commodities that the prices had to go up. And that has affected our economy for sure. Some things, prices are going up because they can, because folks continue to pay for them at very high prices and show demand and show the ability and willingness to pay. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but it is a fact. If you look at certain things I live in Portland, and there are definitely some products in the Portland area and services and restaurants in particular, and the prices have really, really shot up, and the places are full. That will allow prices to continue to go up. That is a big part of capitalism. So there's a lot going on with inflation. Overall, it was because of springing out of the pandemic, a lot of government stimulus, a lot of money in people's bank accounts, a lot of pent-up demand, combined with the war in Ukraine. Overall, that was probably going to be what historians say caused this inflation, but other factors definitely come into play. Employment, I mentioned a couple of times. We have this historically low unemployment, and everybody needs employees. You go wherever you go, there's a shortage of help. There are clothing stores where you can't try on clothes because they don't have enough help, et cetera, et cetera. It is fascinating. It is something I've never seen such a combination of relatively strong inflation, strong economy, a great job market for employees, and such a difficult job market for employers who can't get help. It's fascinating, this combination that has come out of the pandemic. And some other factors I mentioned, I'll say it again, we also had cheap money for a decade. Coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, interest rates were very low for a long time. That's cheap money for mortgages, cars, businesses to expand. Money was just very, very available, easy to borrow. Wages have gone up, not as much as we like, but they have definitely gone up. The wealth effect is the effect when people's investments are doing well, like the stock market did well for so long, even through the pandemic up to 2022. The stock market had a fantastic run. When our investments are doing well, we feel wealthy. We tend to spend more, even though that money might not be in our pocket. The opposite can be true. If the stock market has a prolonged bad period, we feel poorer and scared, and we tend to hold on to our money. Earlier in the year, the down market didn't really affect consumer spending that much. And now that now the market has been fairly good the last several months and stable, I think wealth effect spending will continue. Pandemic stimulus and the war I've already mentioned as major factors. Fiscal and monetary policy, the president and Congress, that's fiscal policy, taxes and spending. Money comes in, they spend money. That is fiscal policy. It affects the economy and it affects all of our lives. Taxes affect all of us. Government spending affects all of us. And that's why it's important to understand when you hear what fiscal policy is. And fiscal policy is very active. As we know, it's in the news all the time. In politics, it's argued. One side says we're going to do this, another side says that. Ultimately, they're spending the same money and taking in the same money. It's just to make the choices as to how to spend it is where the conflict comes in. We do this in our own lives. This is personal finance as well. Money coming in, money going out. How do I make these decisions to make everybody happy? And then the Federal Reserve, monetary policy. The Federal Reserve primarily controls interest rates and the money supply. and the banking system. And their goal is stable prices and a growing economy. This is the Federal Reserve's charge: stable prices and a growing economy and a stable banking system. And it's a fascinating animal, and there are many, many books about it. And there's a lot of controversy about whether the Fed is good or bad. But the Fed exists, and it plays a huge role in our lives, because as those interest rates move, that affects the price, how much we pay on a mortgage, a car loan, a student loan, credit card interest rates, and so on. Business borrowing money, how much we earn in our bank accounts. Although interest rates are high right now for borrowing, it's nice to see 5% in a CD. You can put your money even in a money market account at the local bank and earn 2 or 3%. Whereas for many years, you earned nothing in your savings accounts. So there's good and bad, trade-off and opportunity cost, opportunity benefit. A little more Fed talk. The interest rates, this says it all. Right now, the discount rate, which is the rate that the Federal Reserve charges banks to borrow money on a short-term basis, ultimately, this trickles into the interest rate we pay as consumers. It's 5.5%. A year ago, it was 2.5. That is a massive change in 1 year. And they're doing it to try to slow down the economy. They're trying to make spending through borrowing more expensive and disincentivize spending, disincentivize borrowing. So people don't spend as much. It slows the economy down. It cools off inflation. It's mostly theoretical. People argue as to whether this has worked in the past, but it is what is happening. The Fed also does something called open market operations, which I cannot get into today. It would be an entire day, and it makes my brain hurt. But it has to do with the Federal Reserve buying and selling US government securities in order to increase or decrease available money, which affects the money supply, which affects the economy and all of us. I think it's really important for Americans to have some understanding of what the Federal Reserve does. So the 4 pillars, again: scarcity, trade-off, opportunity cost, the circular flow, and analysis and policy. And I ask again, were the changes in my personal finance behavior influenced by increased knowledge of economics or vice versa? It was mostly, the more I got interested in my own personal finances and wanted to change my personal financial behavior, the economics that I had learned and I was continuing to learn through graduate school and other opportunities started to make more sense. And then I had this little experience called the Peace Corps. I was in the Peace Corps, and I made no money. And during the time when I made no money, I learned the most about money. All right, a quick match game. Here are my economics foundational pillars. And here are something that many sources call the 4 pillars of personal finance: income, assets, expenses, and liabilities. It's interesting to think about how these can connect and where they connect. So what part of economics can I connect to my income, my assets, my expenses, my liabilities? Well, we certainly, I'll just take one very obvious one. We can certainly take trade-off, the idea of trade-off, to our expenses and our income, and the trade-off in the decisions we make about purchases versus savings and about how we live our lives. So it's interesting to think about where the economic concepts and the personal finance concepts overlap. Okay. Honorable mentions of things: if you're interested in more economic education, I recommend looking into something called Unintended Consequences. And the book, the podcast, everything called Freakonomics does a great job of that. Really, because then in your own life, you can start to say, well, if I do this particular thing or make this decision, what are the unintended consequences of that decision, financially, personally, for my family, everything else, for my freedoms and choices. I love the idea of Freakonomics and looking at unintended consequences. Pandemic decision making and policy making is going to be studied for decades as to what the unintended consequences were of all the decisions that were made, with good intentions or not. A deep dive into the Fed and national debt is fascinating and important. And then microeconomics, which is studying particular decisions, especially supply and demand, is also interesting. Economics is, however, limited into what it can do for us. It is a social science. It studies people and their behavior. Behavioral economics has become a huge field, much more so than when I was studying in school, because more and more realization that all of the theories and government policies can't ultimately predict what people are going to do. Adam Smith would say otherwise, but it's true. So it is a social science. And this ceteris paribus in a vacuum and all other things equal, not everything is in a vacuum. We have government intervention. We have relatively free market, but we have to consider governments and other types of factors that affect economic policy, and then our own decisions. Some favorite sources, and again, these slides will be available to you, so you'll be able to see this. I love Visual Capitalist to give me some quick data in a really visual way. And for any of you who work with, if you're ever sharing information or teaching, Visual Capitalist is a really interesting way to crunch data and numbers on anything from coffee consumption to wealthiest people to investment trends, etc. The Economist is classic, can never go wrong with The Economist. Freakonomics, and then some really heavy, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Wow, there is everything in there. It can be hard to digest, but it's all in there. And I mentioned these two books before, The Paradox of Choice and Nickel and Dimed. Okay, now it's time to interact. So hopefully I have on this webinar format, I can't see you, but I'm hoping that some folks are tuned in. And you can use the chat, I think, Mary, is the best place, or the Q&A field, either one. And try to answer these questions just for fun. It's only a competition with yourself, because I'm not in a position to give you prizes. But we're going to ask some econ questions here. So get ready to type your answers, and I'll let some answers come in, and then I'll give you the final answer. So let's go to the facts number one. Per capita, what in the US grew about 65% from 1990 to 2015, compared with about 35% growth in Europe? Per capita, what? What grew in the US at that compared to Europe for the same period? I see one answer coming in, personal spending. We'll give debt, waistlines. They could be connected. Okay. All right. Well, income. Well, Mark Libby, it looks like you were pretty much the closest. The answer is consumption or personal spending. Again, like I said before, 70% of our economy is consumption. And we do it better or worse, depending on where you're sitting in the matter. We do it better than anybody. We consume, and we consume a lot more than, for example, in this case, Europe. Important to know when you're making your own decisions and looking at the choices that you make and your goal setting and what you want in your life, especially in terms of freedom to do particular things, controlling our consumption. Next one, perhaps. There we go. Let's go to the facts number two. Which economist was mostly associated with what we call laissez-faire economics, which is the idea of letting things be no government intervention. Let's just see what happens. And that's always out there. It's called different things nowadays. Back in the 80s, laissez-faire was often mentioned with Ronald Reagan. Nowadays, they use a lot of other terms, but it's the idea of not having a lot of government control. Let's let capitalism take its course. Any ideas of which economist was most associated with that? We got one answer coming in. No Googling, no Googling, no Googling. Okay. All right. Well, this is a name that you may have heard over the years. Come on, Zoom or PowerPoint. One of these two is not playing. Ah, there we go. Milton Friedman is most associated with this type of economics. Keynes, on the other hand, Keynes was more associated with governments spend money. Governments spend it, spend it, spend it. It will come back. It will grow the economy and help everybody. So they kind of represent two very simplified sides of our politics where it overlaps with economics. Number 3, which US state recorded the highest percent gain in personal income, a whopping 11.4% during the first quarter of this year? Which US state? Connecticut, Maine, New York. Good guesses. Utah. All right. It is Maine. A lot of theories as to why it was so strong. One of the, I think, theories that made the most sense to me is that Maine saw one of the biggest declines in personal income during the pandemic. So we had farther to bounce back. Another factor I saw was the minimum wage pressures from Maine communities have really affected personal income. And you can see that when you see places like what convenience stores are paying for new employees and so on. So no one knows for sure yet. It will take a while to digest the data. I have not seen second quarter data reliable yet, but and Mark says an increase of retired people coming back to Maine could be. Some boomerang people coming back to Maine with higher incomes could have also affected that. Absolutely. So there's a lot out there, but it was interesting to see that Maine led the country in that earlier this year. All right. Number 4. There's only 5, so only 2 more. The longest lasting recession in US history began in what year? 2007, 1929, 1873, or 1960? So the longest lasting recession in US history. And it was 1873. And it was called, believe it or not, the Long Recession. And it lasted 5 years. Incidentally, recessions on average last 11 to 13 months, historically speaking, for over 100 years of data, 150 years of data. So 5 years is it's a long recession. And even though 1929 was the Great Depression, the actual amount of time that we technically were in a recession was much shorter than you'd expect, because economic growth had gotten so bad, it was then fairly easy to show positive economic growth coming out of it, like a boomerang effect. But the long recession of 1873. And the last one, the idea for the Federal Reserve Bank was likely hatched in 1910 at a secret meeting held on an island off the southern coast of Georgia. And I'm giving you a sort of a hint that the answer is hiding, HYDE. And if anyone really wants to get into the Federal Reserve, there are so many books, and it is a very fascinating piece of our history as to how the Federal Reserve started. Kind of shady, to be honest with you. All right, I think Mark got it. Jekyll Island, which is, for the folks who don't like the Federal Reserve and everything it does, the fact that it was formed on Jekyll Island fits right into their narrative. We are doing pretty well for time, Mary. So I'm going to first ask if there are any questions, or to be thinking about your questions and put them in. And if there aren't any, I'm just going to mention a couple of last notes, and then we're all set. I don't see any yet, Mary, do you?
None yet, but if you want to go ahead and do last notes, then we can see if some roll in.
Um, so these are stories that I'm not going to tell them all, but a quick thing. And this is where econ and understanding cycles and trade-off and opportunity costs come in. My students over the years, Steve, are you going to buy this stock? Are you going to buy Bitcoin? And yeah, I didn't buy Apple at $5. I didn't buy Bitcoin at $30,000. On the other hand, I didn't lose what would have been all of my savings by buying Bitcoin when it was at 70,000, or cryptocurrencies at 70,000. And I didn't buy Apple at $5. I missed that one, as most people did. But I also didn't lose fortunes on other stocks. Individual stocks are tricky, is one of the lessons here. But the bigger lesson is just that this trade-off and opportunity cost, or opportunity benefit, just because you miss out on one thing that turns out great for some folks, you also had a benefit for all the things you did not jump at. One of the little stories over time. The role of the web nowadays with economics and personal finance is very incredibly easy to get bad information. I saw the percentage of millennials that get their personal finance advice from social media is over 50%. It's an incredibly high number. I perused some of the social media sites where this information is coming from, and it was not just wrong to my eyes, it's just wrong. It's just bad personal finance advice. But like many things on social media, it's out there. So it's also easy to learn from certain sites and gain knowledge, but very tricky though to know which is correct. And then what's a little peace of mind worth? Personal finance and economics for some folks, of course, investing, wealth, all very important, but also choices and doing things with your life that maybe are not financial in nature, and having the ability to do those things and enjoy certain things is also important. And learning the economic concepts and the personal finance ones, and where they overlap, and knowing your decisions are based more in an overall understanding, I think offers a lot of peace of mind, which is worth a lot. And I already mentioned my Ton Stoffel thing, and what I used to tell my students: if someone says it's free, put your hand on your wallet and back away. And then I'm going to mention again, because I think it is absolutely critical in today's environment, is to keep playing America's favorite personal finance quiz show. Is it econ or is it politics? Whenever you hear a person say, this is what's happening or what's going to happen with the economy, definitely hear what somebody else has to say and try to decipher, are they talking politics? Are they talking econ? Is it truly an economic opinion based on theory and history? Or is it somebody with a political sort of lean? Again, self-fulfilling prophecy. If we're told over and over again there's going to be a recession, we're likely going to get conservative and scared and hold on to our money, which will cause a recession. Final thought. For me, knowledge and understanding of economic theories, as well as the nuances of the US economy, provides a platform on which to build or improve personal finance skills. It's worked for me. If there are still here for questions if you have any, but um,
Thank you so much, Steve. There's no questions in the chat. Actually, we have one now that just popped up from Mark.
I can, yeah, oh, I can see it. I'm wondering what can be created? An employee, what can be created? How may I help to get the word out in addition to? So that's more of a fame, Mary. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think that so the question for the audience, because I don't know that everyone can read it, was just inquiring about how employers and employees can spread the word about FAME resources and ways to do that. So certainly, Mark, I'd love to connect again about how we can do that. But I think certainly there's a number of ways that you can spread the word, sharing information about our financial check-in series, any of the training opportunities or webinars that we make available. We have free publications that you can request copies of that you can distribute to your employees or your stakeholders, clients, depending on the audience that you're working with. And then I think also promoting our one-on-one counseling or our events that are focused on financial aid and FAFSA completion as well. When you visit the FAME webpage under financial wellness, there is an entire section for employers with information to support their employees with their financial knowledge and stability. And so I would encourage you to share any of those resources. We have a handout of our financial check-in series, an overview flyer that you can share that sort of highlights all of the resources that we provide. But I'd love to connect with you again directly, Mark, and certainly we can go over more opportunities. But I think visiting our webpage and looking at our events and our financial wellness resources and sharing those via email or, in whatever ways that you see appropriate. And we appreciate that very much. Absolutely.
Very much. And feel free to contact me as well and come visit you or visit a school or a business or wherever I can go.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Steve. And I hope that we'll see you all again in November.
I'm going to put my email